stepped out of line. I spanked him. And unfortunately, I spanked him so hard, he hit the ground. And when I went to go help him up and I looked at him and I was just like, oh my gosh, like what did I just do? Like I didn't want to do that. It was just a horrible reaction. And I went to go pick him up and I went to him like this with my hands and he literally just closed his eyes and did this, like, please don't hurt me again. And that was it. That was 2011. And I was like, there's got to be a better way.
Do you think you've fully forgiven yourself for that moment with your son?
No.
I could see it in your face.
Yeah. I relive that moment a lot. And I think that's because I've been on the other side of that moment a lot. And to feel that fear of someone bigger than you putting their hands on you in a mean way, in a violent way. When I saw his face, I saw myself. And it was just like, holy crap, that was the last thing I ever wanted to do.
Bro, it's time. It's time to forgive yourself. I would just encourage you, brother. It's time to let that go.
But yeah, man, I'm picking up what you're putting down. And I appreciate you holding that mirror to my face. I think this is what good men do for each other.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey, Derelicts. Welcome to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Tomeoni. We got another great show for you today. Let's dive right in. Larry, thanks so much for being here, man. Appreciate
What's up, Josh?
it.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here with you and your beard.
Yeah.
I love it, man. It's just
I love what you said right before the show about how we're two different entities.
Yeah.
You know, there's it triggered a mind. There's an episode of The Family Guy where he grows out a beard. Peter Griffin grows out a beard. I don't know if you've seen this one or not.
Totally, yeah.
And the birds nest in there, right?
Yeah.
He has this whole like bird family and just like feeds them.
Yeah.
And I always think about that whenever I like drop food on my beard, which is pretty much every time I eat because it's impossible not to. And my kids are always like, hey, there's food in your beard. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm saving it for later. Or I'm saving it for the beards or the birds.
The bird will get it. That's right, Lois. The bird will get it.
Yeah. So Dad Edge, you are the host of the Dad Edge podcast. You are the host of the Dad Edge just in general, as far as the brand goes. You've written several books about fatherhood, about being a dad. Let's just start with that. So for everybody listening, I think here's a couple things we're going to get into. We're going to get into his new book, which I'm really excited to hear about, which is coming out. When did you say? In September?
September 16th.
September 16th, approximately. So be on the lookout for that, you guys. We'll put a link in the show notes of where you can get that as well. And I'm interested to hear about all these different books and kind of what, how you see yourself. I mean, do you see yourself as a dad authority? We'll get to that in a moment and what that looks like. Or are you seeing yourself as an authority because you've made so many failures and so many mistakes that now you're the authority? Or are you the authority because you have it all together? All that sort of stuff we're going to get into. And the most important thing, the thing we talked about right before the show, which I'm really excited about, is the different stages of fatherhood. That sounds really intriguing to me. I definitely related to that in my own personal level. So maybe let's just start with you personally. You are a dad, I'm assuming, since you have all this dad stuff going on. How old are your kids? When did you become a dad? All that sort of stuff. Give us a little background.
So I can't remember how many kids I have because at this point there's too many of them, but I have 4 boys, which makes my wife a martyr. And I say things out loud in my house, Josh, that I've only either said at college fraternity parties or I've never said to any other human being on the planet. So, why is there half-eaten peanut butter and jelly Uncrustable on the sink of the bathroom? Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I actually took a photo of this and I'm so like, how did this get here? Did they walk in as they were eating? I hope to God they weren't eating as they were taking a dump. Did they wash their hands and forget it was here? I have no idea. All I know is it was not supposed to be in the spot that I saw it, which was on the sink. Thank God. At least it wasn't like on the toilet lid, but just stuff like that, man.
For sure. I mean, I found one of my kids' socks on top of their slime table the other day. I'm like, why? Okay. I don't understand how you take off the sock and put it on top of the table while you're making the slime. Like, I just don't even understand how that happens.
Yeah.
Or like the weird places I find shoes. I'm like, I don't even understand how the shoe got there. Like, you couldn't have even thrown it over there.
Right. I think if someone broke in our house, like there would be a booby trap of shoes around every corner. Like the burglar or the whatever was the intruder would sprain his ankle, break his leg, rupture his patella tendon, something like that, before he even got to anything good in our house. So
Bro,
like
you don't
there's
even need a
traps
gun.
everywhere.
Just put the shoes all over the place. We'll
Shoes.
just trip
Yeah.
on those.
Yeah. Well, getting back to your question, I've been in the dad space now. I've been podcasting now for 10 years, which I've been told that makes me an OG of podcasting. I'll take that, I guess. And, but how I view myself, I want to get to that question here really, really quickly. I'm holding up a copy of my book that is coming out. It's hitting the shelves on September 16th. And when I first went through my publisher, who, by the way, my publisher is not married, or at least he wasn't at the time we were working on the book, and he has no kids. And he's like, Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood, why not just call it Legendary Fatherhood? And I'm like, well, brother, I was like, truth be told, there quite frankly is no such thing, but there is the pursuit of it. So to answer your question, do I view myself as a guru and authority in the space? I guess a little bit, but barely. I'd give it more 80-20. 20%, I've had the privilege of learning from people way smarter than me, and I continue to learn from people way smarter than me, which is awesome. And I view this community as a learning community, and that's what 80% is. And what I can tell you after helping 4,000 men over the past 10 years through our mastermind, I've learned just as much from my clients and my members as they have from me. So it's this beautiful exchange, I think, of information and what we call crowdsource wisdom and experiential learning. And what I've done actually with Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood is I've taken that 10 years of learning, and from whether it's experts on the podcast, whether it's things that I've learned and implemented myself, maybe more that 20, 30% of being like, okay, I now know what this looks like, right? I'm not falling on my face on this anymore. I think I've got my arms wrapped around this area, give or take. And then the other, 80 to 70, 80% is really like, I'm still learning. I tell this to my 19-year-old, who's the oldest all the time. He's like, what's it like being a dad? And I was like, well, it's kind of like your first day of school, but you've been in school for a while too, being at my age and how long I've been a dad. I was like, today, here's a perfect example. My oldest son is Ethan. I said, Ethan, today you're 19 years old, 3 months and 1 day. And today is my first day raising a 19-year-old, 3 months and 1 day. And tomorrow will be my first day raising a 19-year-old, 3 months and 2 days. So it's forever dynamic. It's forever changing. And that's why I titled the book, The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood, because I don't know any guy unless we're completely, totally we're not self-aware. I don't think any of us get to the top of the mountain and say, look, I did it. I did it perfectly. Like Legendary Fatherhood. There it is. There was only one perfect man that walked the earth, and I'm not him. So that's my view of it. And so does that answer your question as far as the authority?
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. I love it.
You also asked the question, like, where did this come from? So I've shared this story, gosh, probably 1,000 times, but I think my journey as a dad, it really started when I was a kid. My mom and my real dad, my biological father, got married very young, like 21 years old. They had me in 1975, 4 years after they got married. And then about 9 months after I was born, my mom and dad had a really horrific, horrible divorce, and my dad just left. And it was just me and my mom. And it was like that for 4 years, 5 years. And I remember being in preschool, and it was just me and my mom. And I remember dads, I still remember this to this day. I remember dads coming to preschool to pick up my friends. And some dads wore suits, and some dads wore jeans, and some dads were construction workers, and some dads weren't, and that kind of thing. And I knew what a dad was, but I didn't have one. But in my mind, I was like, well, moms go out and find dads and bring them home. Literally how I computed the whole thing. So I'll never forget the first time my mom actually brought home a man that she had been dating. And she told me one day, and she's like, I was 5. And she's like, hey, I have a special friend coming over for dinner tonight. We've been friends for a few months. I work with him, and I want you to meet him. That was her way of saying, I've been dating somebody I work with, and he's going to come over for dinner, and you're going to meet him. So in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, that's him. That's the guy. That's the dad. And I'll never forget, like, this man walking in my house. Like, he was wearing a trench coat, a 3-piece suit, a double Windsor tie, mustache, not nearly as epic as your facial hair, but he had the handlebar mustache at least. And I'll never forget, like, the feeling of looking up at this guy. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's the dad. Like, that's gotta be the dad. And I shook this guy's hand, and his name was Joe. And I literally looked up at him. I said, are you going to be my dad? And I remember my mom like gasping, and he just like awkwardly laughed, but he shook my hand. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, they got married. And it was like awesome, family fulfilled, right? And they were good for about a year. And they were married a total of 5 years, and every year just got really disastrous. Like a lot of physical abuse, a lot of mental abuse. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, running in my mom's bedroom where my dad was pinning down my mom and hitting her, my mom screaming, and me trying to pry his hands like off of her. And then the neighbors calling the cops coming over. Like this was kind of I don't want to say it was normal, but it wasn't abnormal for the cops to come to my house every now and again and break them up. By the time I was 10, they divorced, and I've never seen him since. I found out about 15 years ago. He died, and the only reason I knew that was because I got a knock on my door from the courts saying that I was his only living heir and I had rights to a home that he left behind. And I told them to go ahead and walk the other way, and I didn't want anything to do with it, give it to the county. So back to when I was 10, and I just started asking a lot of questions. I knew, obviously, what the birds and the bees were, and I was like, this guy didn't come along until I was 5. That's when my mom laid it on me that I had another dad out there. I had no idea. So a couple of years passed by. I'm 12. I won't get into it for the sake of time, but I had the opportunity to meet my father for the first time, and he lived 3 miles from us. I had no idea. I don't know if my mom knew that or not, but I did meet him, and he was remarried, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And I was over the moon, man, like meeting my dad for the first time. I'll never forget the day it was, what I wore, what it was like. First time I hugged him and saw him and everything. And we had a relationship that lasted about 6 months. He came to all my Little League games. I called him dad right out of the gate. I spent the night at his house. I spent time with his family. And then after about 6 months, our relationship completely dissolved and he was out of my life again. And that really was horrific for me as a kid. And I really kind of got into a bad mentality. I failed the 8th grade. I actually did 8th grade twice. I just gave up on school. It wasn't because I wasn't smart. I just gave up. I was like, I just don't have any direction. Mom continued to date really toxic, horrible, alcoholic, drug using men, and then got remarried for the 3rd time when I was 18. That guy was pretty good, but still heavy drinker and kind of toxicity. I went away to college, got a bachelor's degree of science, and went on to a career in medical device sales and married my college sweetheart. And this is where the story gets really real. So I'm 30 years old. This is 20 years ago. And I'm sitting in a Starbucks with my sales team, and I noticed this guy walk in, and I was married at the time for a couple of years, and I had my first son on the way who's 19 now. And I remember looking up, and I had this guy caught my eye, and I looked over and I was like, holy crap, that's my dad.
No shit.
Yeah. Hadn't seen him since I was 12. And yeah, I still to this day, I kind of get the chills like thinking about it. And that interaction turned into what has now been a 20-year relationship. And my dad and I have a relationship, and he's still married to the same woman 47 years now. And it's pretty crazy. And I have 2 younger half brothers. But Dad Edge really got started 6 years into my parenting journey because I made myself 3 promises. Number one, I was going to be a good husband. That was a promise. I was going to be a good dad, patient and calm. And I was never going to hit my children out of anger. And I broke all 3 of those promises. And the 3rd one was the straw that broke the camel's back. My son was 4. He's 17 now. He stepped out of line. I spanked him. And unfortunately, I spanked him so hard, he hit the ground. And when I went to go help him up, and I looked at him and I was just like, oh my gosh, like what did I just do? Like I didn't want to do that. It was just a horrible reaction. And I went to go pick him up, and I went to him like this with my hands, and he literally just closed his eyes and did this, like, please don't hurt me again. And that was it. That was 2011. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. And it was that night I started a Facebook page called the Good Dad Project. And it was just a page for me and nobody else. And I just was like, could this whole dad thing, this whole husband thing, could it be like anything else in life? In other words, like I loved martial arts. I did that for a long time. I got my degree in health management with a minor in nutrition. I learned how to do my job in surgical sales by training. Like, could there be skills that are associated with being a better man, husband, and father? And if so, I'm on the hunt, and I'm going to learn. And that's where it started. And that page grew a huge following. Not because I wanted it to. I think it was because I was just like, I'm an idiot. I'm a moron. I'm trying to figure this out. And people liked that. And then in 2015, I was just like, I'm done writing. I just want to start to talk to people now. And I never expected anybody even listen to the show. Like, it was just a record more for me. And then it just, after about a year, it completely blew up, where I was having professional UFC fighters on the show, A-list Hollywood actors, all these people want to talk about fatherhood. And I was like, holy crap, like, how did this even get here? And it's been 10 years and still learning, still make mistakes, still fall on my face, still have bad moments, but I'm able to recover a lot faster. I'm able to help more people. And it's all been through this process of learning. So hopefully that answers your question.
That definitely answers my question. It's an awesome answer. So I was doing some quick math. You're 50?
Wait, next week.
Okay. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
That's amazing. How do you feel about that?
I feel great because, luckily when people ask me how old I am, or if I tell them, they're like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yeah, I am. But yeah, I feel great. I definitely don't feel my age. If you ask my wife and kids, I don't act my age, so yeah, I'm good with it.
Well, and part of the reason I was asking too is because it's, there's several aspects of you that as we're talking, I almost see myself in you in the future. So I'm 41, so I'm almost a decade behind you. And which I think is interesting because this whole thing started about a decade ago, just based on what you just said, right?
Right.
And I'm curious, what led you to the I mean, I can tell already just based on your story why you eventually got here. Obviously, why you have a huge passion for it, just given your own experience. But what led you to actually just dive in fully? I mean, what was it about that you're like, yeah, I got to do this? And by the way, I also want to speak to what you just said. I think there's a lot of validity to what you just said, because I know that for myself as well, when I'm just open and honest and authentic online or with people or on this podcast, that's when people really relate, because they don't want somebody that has all their shit figured out, because none of us do, right? The whole reason I started my podcast is like, I'm so tired of people just pretending like they have all their shit together all the time. Like, let's talk about the struggles. Let's talk about the difficult aspects and how we work through that. What is, maybe a better question, what's kept you going that long? What's kept you going for the last decade of just realizing, yeah, man, I got to be here, and I got to be here for these men, and I want to support them. And in your own words, maybe you've even learned more from them than you've taught them.
I'll give you two answers. I'll give you the abundance mindset, which is, I don't think a lot of our default mindset. It's one thing I've had to learn. And then I'll give you the scarcity one.
Okay.
I'll give you the scarcity one, which is, I view this mission and movement, and I guess me at the helm of it, that it's like anything else in life. Like, I love fitness and I love working out. It's been something so therapeutic for me, especially I grew up a fat kid who was made fun of all the time. Kind of like the guy from Ryan Reynolds from Just Friends, who was Chris Brander, a fat guy back in high school. And then he gets skinny, and like, I was the fat kid, and what I'll tell you is that when we stop eating healthy and we stop working out, basically keeping the sword sharp, right, things start to fall off the wheels, right? So like, scarcity wise, I know firsthand what it felt like to grow up in a really abusive, toxic home where everything was uncertain and everything at the drop of a button, at the final gulp of a vodka bottle, how bad things could be. And I remember being terrified and never wanting to be in my own house, and that unsafety thing. And I desperately wanted to have a connection with my mom and a masculine father figure in my life that just was never there. The abundance thing is, well, the scarcity thing is, I never, ever, ever, ever want my children to experience that. I don't want my wife to experience that. And quite frankly, selfishly, I don't want to give that because it's very unfulfilling. The abundance thing is this: how can I learn, grow, and evolve and create something that I did not have growing up? And I could do it with my kids and my wife, and I can share it with others so that we can all learn together and we can all do this together. That's where this really, really comes from. And here's the thing that really burns in my mind. My 17-year-old, I'm 180 pounds. My 17-year-old's 200 pounds. He just hit the 1,000-pound club in his high school, meaning that he can, in combined 3 lifts of squat, bench, and clean, not deadlift, which blows my mind, he can lift over 1,000 pounds in those 3 lifts.
Squat, bench, and what was the third one?
Clean.
Wow.
I know. It's terrifying.
He's intense. How tall is he?
5'9", and he's...
Yeah, that dude is thick, bro. Wow.
He is.
Wow.
He's the starting center for his football team, and we have to buy special shorts because his thighs are 28 and a half inches wide. He's a big boy.
How old is he, did you say? Wow. That's amazing. How tall are you?
6'1".
So you got several inches on him, and he's got 20 pounds on you. Yeah, he's a big boy.
He's big.
Wow.
And I still see that boy's face when I hit him and him doing this. And, you know, if I can help another man avoid that situation and for his son or daughter to experience that situation, to carry that, tough, man. You know, and granted, it was one episode, but one episode too many, in my opinion. And I never want that to happen again. And to be honest, I look at this as I don't know when I'll stop doing this. I have no plan to stop doing it. It's been a decade. I could easily see it being another decade because I never want to let my foot off the gas of learning and giving back to people who want to learn as well. And I think, and to finalize this thought is the biggest gap that I see, you know, in men is it's not the desire. Like, in fact, I think we have a generation of men right now who have an insane desire to show up for their kids. We've never seen, you know, you never go to the playground and like dads want to be at every game now. You know, that wasn't my case growing up. Dads want to be playing with their kids now. You see dads all the time with their kids. The biggest gap that I see, it's not the desire. It's like, I don't exactly know what the implementation of this looks like. I don't know what good looks like when it's happening. And like, it's kind of like fitness. There's a lot of people out there of like, you can go lift weights and somewhat eat healthy, but until you really dial it in and get some help, that's when like, this is what you do. This is when you do it, how often you do it. And I'm going to hold you accountable to do it. So I think that's the biggest game changer.
I want to come back to that because I think that there's a lot of truth to that. Just not knowing what it looks like. But before we do you think you've fully forgiven yourself for that moment with your son?
No.
I could see it in your face.
Yeah. I relive that moment a lot. And I think that's because I've been on the other side of that moment a lot. And to feel that fear of someone bigger than you putting their hands on you in a mean way, in a violent way, even though it was a swat on the rear end. It wasn't like I punched him or anything like that. I swatted him, and unfortunately it was too hard and he lost his balance. But when I saw his face, I saw myself, and it was just like, holy crap, that was the last thing I ever wanted to do. But there again, you know, I don't think this thing would be here today if it wasn't. And my son will even tell me all day long, he was like, it's not that big of a deal. It's fine. You know?
Well, it was a big deal because it was a big deal to you. But bro, it's time. It's time to forgive yourself. I'm just telling you that right now. I'm very appreciative of the fact that you have that and that you're carrying that and that that's really motivating your mission because that's really powerful and that's really helping a lot of guys. People have maybe told you this before, but I'm going to tell you again. That is, you don't need it to motivate your mission. Your mission's already there. So if you're holding on to it for any reason, just because you feel like it's motivating mission or something, maybe even subconsciously, I would just encourage you, brother, it's time to let that go.
It's good advice.
It's over. It's done with. Pray through it, meditate through it. You seem like you're a spiritual guy just based on our very brief interaction so far. If you believe in God or a higher power, I would encourage you to sit down and pray and ask him to release that from you or her or it or whatever you want to call it. I'm
very much a Christ follower. So yeah, man, I'm picking up what you're putting down and I appreciate you holding that mirror to my face. I think this is what good men do for each other.
You're welcome. Well, I'd really encourage you to sit down alone then with Jesus, since you're a Christ follower, and ask him what you need to do to forgive yourself and then do it and move on, because brother, you can't carry that anymore. I'm just letting you know. Yeah, you made a mistake. Sure, you did. We've all made mistakes. As you were telling that story. And also, by the way, I just was going to say, if you practically are actually going to do this and you want more help just with like some words to say and that sort of thing, let me know later. And I'm happy to help you with that. There's a lot of power of just to, you know, I'll often sit down and this is for anyone listening too. Again, even if you don't even believe if you're not a Christ follower, or you don't believe in God, or you just believe in universe or spirit or whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of power to just sitting down and asking that spirit or that higher power, that God, like, who do I need to forgive and how do I need to forgive and what does that look like? And I think maybe the biggest person in that spot might be you right now.
Great.
I remember this as you were telling this story. I was remembering when I was going through this when I was going through my divorce, well, it was actually probably right before we even got paper started, but it was the worst time of our marriage by far. And I remember there was this one time, like, we didn't really get in screaming matches that often. It was pretty rare for us, but there was this one time where I was unhinged, and we were just in the kitchen and we were just unhinged at each other. And I think it was the only time I ever swore at my wife. And, I can't remember what I said. I'm sure I dropped a bunch of fucks and probably called her a bitch. Like, it was not good. It was probably the worst I've ever done. And then the way our house was set up is that there's the kitchen here, and then this is the, like the little the entryway with the front door, right? So if you could picture this, it's kind of hard to do it online. And then right here at the front door were the stairs up to the second story, right? So I was in the kitchen. We were doing this yelling fight. I walk out to like the main area because I'm about to leave in the front door, and I look up the stairs, and the thing that I remember, my son's face in that moment. And he was just devastated. I don't know what other word to use. Like, you could just see in his face, like, I don't know if I'd ever felt that I fucked up that before in that moment, because I just saw it in his eyes. And it triggered the same thing that in me, I haven't thought about this in a long time. Your story made me think of this. It triggered in me the same thing that triggered in you. What it triggered in me is all the yelling fights and everything when I was growing up, and my parents always being at each other and all that sort of stuff. Because it's like the one thing you don't want to do, right? It's the classic, like, I got abused or I got yelled at or I got whatever, fill in the blank. And therefore that's not what I want to do with my kids. And then inevitably we do it at least once, maybe twice, maybe all the time. I mean, I had a friend that was abused a lot as a kid. And then, he always was like, I hate my dad, I'm never going to do it, etc. And then he became an abusive guy himself when he had kids, because it's what he knows and it's what's comfortable. So it's really sad, but at the end of the day, bro, it's time to forgive yourself.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that, Jeff.
You're welcome. I want to go back to what you were saying, because it also, it really hit me hard, because I feel the same way where, and this is maybe even harder. The good thing about being married is that, or being in a partnership, whatever, with some sort of long-term, especially if you're with the mom of your kids, is that you have a constant mirror, right? You have a constant mirror that when you're interacting with your children, you're going to hear about it if somebody thinks that it's the wrong way to interact with your children. I would say one of the hardest things about being divorced by myself with my children is that there's no mirror. The only mirror is my kids. And sometimes that's an accurate mirror. Sometimes it's not. They're 8, 10, and 12. So sometimes that is a kid mirror. Sometimes it's an adult mirror. But there's often times where I'm going along in life with my kids. I'm like, man, I wish I had another adult mirror here to make sure that I'm doing this right. So it goes back to your comment about, what does that even look like? How do we even see that we're doing the type of fatherhood we want to do? Like, how do you help men with that? I'm curious, after the last decade of doing this, how do you hold that mirror up to them? Is it just a matter of you having conversations with them? Is it practical tips that you're giving them for them to really realize that they're doing fatherhood the way they want to? Any comments on that?
Sure. So I think, I really, let me address actually the really, really fascinating question. And I would even say perspective of the mirror, right? And like, if you're married, then there's someone else in there, right? But we use this term a lot in the group, which is called zooming out, and watching your life unfold from the witness versus what you see through your eyes. It's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life, and was it George? Oh my gosh,
Bailey,
yeah, and he's watching his life, right? And one thing that I do this personally, I also coach to this as well, which is, if you were in the room and you didn't know that you were there and you're watching your life unfold with your kids or your wife or whatever, would you be proud of what you're seeing? How would you operate? How would you sit back and be like, yes, that's it right there? Or is like, that's not how I want to live, right? And I think that there's a lot of perspective in that witness of knowing, like, if you were Ebenezer Scrooge and you were past, present, future, what would you be seeing? What are you leaving behind? And that's a very telling mirror right there without even somebody else in there for you. So I think that there's that. We call that zooming out, or the witness perspective. As far as like,
how do you, just real quick, how do you do that in an honest way? Because we lie to ourselves, right? I mean, everybody lies to themselves. So how do you do that in an honest way?
luckily, I think there's a lot of decently self-aware men out there that they're probably more critical of themselves, at least the men that I come across. They're more critical of themselves than they give themselves, like, I'm doing it all right.
For sure.
So it's actually, quite frankly, in my opinion, or in my experience over the past decade, the guys that usually come knocking on our doorstep in our programs is usually the guy who's beating himself up pretty darn good.
Well, that's why he's there, right?
Yeah.
He wants to become a better dad. He's probably beating. Yeah, for sure. I relate to that, because if he didn't want to be a better dad, then why would he come knocking on the door in the first place?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that there is some perspective too, that, like, I think this goes back to answer the second part of your question of, like, maybe they're not aware. I think this will give some perspective. If what do you do this full time, Josh?
Do I do what? Oh, coaching? No.
Coaching or podcasting, or what? Do you mind me asking what you do full time?
Sure. Yeah, I own a financial planning company as well. I've been doing it for almost 2 decades now.
Perfect. So you're like a wealth manager?
You could call it that, sure.
Okay. So here,
yeah. I mean, in probably the easiest terms possible, I work with families. I help them protect against financial threats to meet their financial goals, things like retirement and other things. So it's not just wealth management. Most people picture me as just managing money. That's part of what we do. But there's a lot of threats that people face, financially speaking, that aren't addressed with money management, such as budgets, taxes, cash flow, the way their businesses are set up, things that insurance can cover, right? There's a lot of other aspects besides just managing money.
Perfect. So you would be the guy that I would want to go to, because I would say at my age, I'm aware now, but in my earlier years, like, I would want someone else to help me with that. Like, how do I here's what I want at the end of this rainbow.
Well, I'll tell you what, Larry, I've been doing this for 19 years now, and I have not met one single individual or family that has it all figured out. Not one.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they have a 0 net worth or 100 million net worth or somewhere in between. So there's always financial threats in every single person's life, no matter whether they have an advisor or they don't. So there's my soapbox for a second, because, my entire career, people are like, yeah, I got this figured out, or I got this figured out. And I've never met one person that has it figured out. So that's a great analogy probably to what you do, I would guess.
Yeah, it's, I definitely don't have that figured out. So I have a Josh in my life, right? But his name's Austin. And I give Austin, like, hey, here's what I'd like to have. And then Austin meets me there, right? And then and I'm sure you do the same with your clients. And then he's also like, hey, have you thought of this, this, and this, all these blind spots, right? And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about those things. How do we protect those things? How do we prepare for those things? I'm sure if I spent enough time training under you or Austin, like if I went to go do what you do, you could teach me tactically exactly how to do your job, right? I've just never had the training. Quite frankly, when it comes to raising kids and when it comes to, being married and being a leader in your home, the same rules actually do apply. You can learn the tactical skills to do those things. Just most of us, the gap is I don't know exactly what that is. I need a Josh in my life to help me with that, right? So for instance, I think a lot of people aren't aware of, what is your wife's 3 basic needs, right? And I'm not talking food, shelter, clothing. I'm talking, what does she need from a relationship? It's very different from a man. And most married couples have no clue that these 3 needs even exist. And she needs to feel seen, she needs to feel heard, and she needs to feel safe. And that safety button is the most important. And the safety button has like all these olive branches through it. Like there's financial safety, there's emotional safety, mental safety, physical safety. There's safety with the kids. Are you a patient, calm dad, or are you like a loose trigger finger with your kids type thing? So those 3 needs, usually a man, while we see our wives, we don't necessarily sometimes see them in the way that we want to say it most of the time. And I know when I see my wife in yoga pants, I want to tell her how hot she is, right? Versus like, hey, I really saw how patient you were with Colton, and when he was losing his mind. And I just want to say, man, that was really cool to see that, that you were so patient. Something like that. When my wife is talking to me, do I validate her emotional state, or do I suddenly become the wiser man in the conversation trying to fix all of our problems, which annoys usually the heck out of them, right? That does
they're not heard.
They're not heard. In fact, it's actually the opposite. Guys we usually, and I got this wrong, dude, for so long. But the thing that the way women take that is a couple different things. If you're thinking about how to fix it, then you're actually not listening to me. if you're thinking about how to fix it, then you really don't trust me, because if you don't trust me, that's kind of condescending that you automatically become my advisor. I don't need an advisor. I just need you to listen. I just need space. And what we really teach men is how to validate emotional space. And then the safety thing, if you can knock down the first two, the safety factor usually intensifies and it gets pretty good. So that's that. And here's the good news. It's really, really simple if you're a dad and a husband, because your kids, boy or girl, doesn't matter how old they are. Doesn't matter if they're 5 or 19. Doesn't matter if they're a boy or girl, seen, heard, and safe. Exact same needs. So if we know how to tactically fulfill those needs, which is one of the things of many that we teach, you suddenly become way more attractive to your wife, way more of a partner to your wife, and with the most interesting dad on the block, the most fascinating dad on the block when you can do that. Now, here's the flip side of that. Men need to have 3 needs: to feel appreciated, respected, and we need physical affection. When we have those 3 things, that's when life feels pretty darn good. Now, here's where a lot of couples get in trouble and a lot of dads get in trouble, is that when we're trying to do it our way, right, which is the advisor, the complimenter, we're not really listening, we blow up, we're not really calm. Well, that's when usually our wives will quote unquote kind of nag us or poke at us trying to get our attention, but we take it as disrespect. We take it as, you don't appreciate me. Do you see all the things I'm doing here? You don't even see them. And then what usually goes, and the third thing to go is the physical affection. Oh, we haven't had sex in 3 months. So what happens is both parties get super spiteful, super resentful, and then we're at war, right? And it usually all boils down to those needs not being met. That's like the simplest thing. That's like building. If you can build that foundation if you can build that house on that foundation, man, you got a heck of a start. I've been married for 23 years. I wish someone would have given me that, just what I just told you in the beginning.
For sure. And I love that analogy too, Larry, because what you just said is true as well. That also applies to our kids. Like if I've definitely learned that the hard way over and over and over again with my 2 girls. So I have 3 kids, 1 boy, 2 girls. And I've learned that over and over again with my girls, is that, it's still easy for me to go in quote unquote man mode and try to fix the problem. So my girls are 2 years apart and they're 8 and 10. So they're either constantly loving each other or constantly wanting to kill each other. They just constantly, right? Like there's just always screaming, there's always yelling, there's always something going on. Like they're just very, very, animated in that sense. And I remember this time, not probably, 6 months ago or so, where it was one that really stands out to me, where my daughters were arguing about something. And my oldest one was telling me, the 10-year-old was telling me what was going on with the 8-year-old. And I was listening, and I was doing a really good job listening, and I was hearing her and everything else. And then I started asking questions. I wasn't even fixing it, right? I was asking questions to try to clarify, and she flipped out on me. And she was like, "You're not even listening. You don't even understand what I'm saying, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "I'm asking questions because I'm trying to understand what's going on." And it wasn't until I processed that afterwards. I was like, what the hell? I didn't even try to fix things. I tried to listen to her. I tried to support her. I tried to make sure that she was seen and heard and safe, right? And I didn't realize until afterwards, it's because of the fact that it was almost like another form of trying to give her advice.
Yeah.
Because she didn't need to share those details with me. Like that's just where my mind went, because I'm curious and analytical and everything else. But she didn't need to share those details. And by me asking for those details, it was almost as if I wasn't even listening to what she was saying. And I didn't realize that until afterwards. I was like, oh man, that seen, heard stuff can be very insidious. Like it's really below the surface sometimes. It's not as simple as like you just need to nod when your wife is talking and saying, "I see you, I hear you, I love you," right? It's not always that simple, because there could be other things where like, no, you got to respond exactly to what's going on there. That's so true. So true. And I know for myself as a man, even with my children, let's take this out of romantic relationships, partnerships, marriages, whatever. Even with my children, when I'm not feeling appreciated or respected or physical affection with them, right? If I'm not getting the hugs, then I'm I feel like I'm messing up as a dad. I feel like I'm not as connected to them. I feel like I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, I do all these things and they don't respect me. They don't appreciate me. Look at all this stuff that I'm doing for them, right? It's the same pattern. So I think it's really interesting you say that, especially as the guy that is the dad edge, because if you can nail that first with yourself, right? And then your spouse or your partner, or your significant other, and then with your kids, man, that's the game.
Can I comment on that? Because
Sure.
what you just said, Josh, was so insanely powerful, and usually one of the biggest things that's missed with us dudes, and I want to make sure your audience picked up on it. And that is usually what we do, because we have those buttons, right? We have those needs of respect, appreciation, physical affection. Because at the end of the day, what does a man really need? It's validation. We're always asking ourselves, am I good enough dad? Am I a good enough husband? Am I enough? Do I make enough? Am I this? Am I this? Am I enough, right? And when we get that respect, when we get appreciation, we get physical affection, that feels like, oh, I'm enough, right? So what happens to us
The
guys?
same is true with women, by the way, right? Like we're all just seeking validation, but they're seeking validation in a slightly different way than we are.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a great book out there. I'm sure you've heard of it. I've had Dr. Robert Glover on my podcast 3 times now talking about No More Mr. Nice Guy. What men will do, and this is not a dig on men, because there's a little bit of this or a big part of us, depending on the degree of that nice guy that's in us, we give to get, right? And we have an agenda. We want to fix to get respect. We want to fix to get appreciation. We want to do things because we want that physical affection back, right? Or whatever else. And if not, then we feel less than. It's almost like, I want to give, but I have an agenda here. And the thing is that our kids and our wives, they're the wiser. They can sniff that a mile away. Human beings can sniff that a mile away. Think of the last time you had an interaction with a sales guy and you knew right from 10 words in, does this guy have my best interest at heart? Or does he just want to sell me the car that's $10,000 more because he wants to make more money? You can sniff that a mile away if a man genuinely wants to solve your problem just because that's what he does and who he is. I'm solving Josh's problems. You probably do that for your clients. You probably solve their problems, like just by the little time I've known you.
I mean, I absolutely do. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been in the business so long. My business has a 95% failure rate, so it's very difficult to stay. Yeah. But here's my big but, dude. It hasn't always been perfect. I've definitely had those moments more times than I would like to admit, where finances are low, the revenue's not coming in, whatever it is, I'm stressed out and I'm just like, just buy something from me. And that's all I care about. I don't give a shit about you. I don't give a shit about your problems. I just want you to buy this so that I can get the revenue so that I can, move on. I've definitely had those moments.
Sure. We've all.
I would love to say I never did, but I definitely have.
Yeah,
but you're absolutely right. Like the amount of times I've had those moments and it actually turned into a sale is next to none, because people can smell that, like you said.
They can. So what if we flip that on its head and we do this instead? What if, like I literally just did, it's probably gone by now because it was 24 hours old, but I just did this on my story where I went up to my 9-year-old son. He was eating breakfast and I gave him some morning, like, love. I'm like, what's up, buddy? And I just kind of like give him a kiss on the cheek and I kind of hug him. And normally, like I would say 80% of the time he's receptive and gives that love back and he's smiling and all that. Well, on this day, he was like, get away from me. Like that was like written all over his face. And I never let that faze me anymore. And I did the video. So I took the video and I didn't post it to the story. I video. I was like, this is a perfect time to really hit this point home. So the video I did before that, I was like, I'm going to share a video of me giving my son love this morning. And he was not responsive or was not receptive. And back in the old days, I used to kind of get butthurt over that. Like, dude, like, why aren't you like giving back? Like, come on, why aren't you unhappy? Like I'm trying to give you some love. And instead I'm like, no, I'm his dad. I give, not to get. My job is to give him affection. I am not interested in whether or not he wants to give it back to me. He'll do that on his own time. Every kid, every adult has a bad morning. They feel rough. They feel crabby. It's fine. Like, and I stake the validation in, I did what I'm supposed to do, period. Whether he responds the way I want to or not. Same thing with my wife. I'm going to do the things to pursue my wife and to attract her in. At the end of the day, I don't control her. But at the end of the day, I can also zoom out from that situation and being like, I don't control her, but I control me. And the validation actually comes from me and not from someone else. So, and then the video, and then I showed the video and I said, so just, in the future, if you kind of get hurt over this, number one, it's pretty darn normal. But number two, it's okay if they don't all the time. It's just knowing that it comes from us. It comes from internally. I'm showing love regardless of his response.
It's so true. And you just hit another point that I just want to bring up real quick before we end here, because I know we're about to shut this off, even though I could definitely talk to you for a lot longer. That's for sure. Too bad it's not the Joe Rogan podcast and it's going to be 4 hours.
4 hours long.
Yeah, we got 3.5 hours left, something like that. But here's, I talk about this a lot. I talk about it in my book as well. And that is back to the validation piece. I don't think this is too big of a statement. Here's where all humans get in trouble. And that is seeking validation or needing validation from anyone other than their higher power in themselves. Because the only way to get true validation that truly validates you is from two places. Up there, whatever you think that is, universe, higher power, God, Jesus for you, right? Whatever that is. And then right in here. And I know I could pretty much look at every single mistake and failure I've ever had in my life. And it's always been because I'm trying to get validation from another source besides those two. And those two are the only ones. And guys have, and women as well, but they have problem when they're just trying to validate themselves without their higher power. They have validation when they're trying to validate their higher power without themselves. I mean, I grew up in church, and what I saw in church a lot is people trying to validate themselves with their God and not with themselves. And that doesn't work either, because if you don't love yourself and you only love this ethereal being, that's not going to work. You have to love both. You just have to. It can't be, I'm just going to completely forget about myself because God is all that matters. It doesn't work. Try to argue with me otherwise. It just doesn't. And then, of course, if you're just loving yourself, that can very easily turn into something that's very egotistical or narcissistic or anything else, right? And then you have the validation of, well, I'm going to get validation from somewhere else because I'm not feeling it from myself. The only reason we seek validation from somewhere else is because we're not getting it from ourselves and our higher power. That's it. Wouldn't that be an amazing place to live if we could just get 100% of our validation from our higher power and ourselves?
I think we just try to overcomplicate the heck out of it, because there's that part of us that needs it so bad. So we're willing to kind of go get it from anywhere, So yeah, sure. I agree with you.
I mean, anything that anyone uses to medicate wouldn't exist if they were just fully validated with themselves. It wouldn't. It would all get wiped off the planet. There would be no drugs, there'd be no alcohol, there'd be no pornography, there'd be no fill in the blank, because it wouldn't be needed, because we just get it all from ourselves and our higher power. And that's the life I want to live. I'll tell you that much.
Having an epic beard does help that validation piece, though. I will say that to bring it full circle.
I get more compliments on this from men than I do from women. So if I'm trying to seek validation from women, it doesn't always necessarily help. Women are very dependent on it. Guys, there's very few guys that don't like it. And I think it's just because of it's like this sign of manhood for some reason, even though I didn't do it. I just sat here and it grew. I didn't really do it. And I put oils in it and stuff. But it's really interesting to me. And then women are very hot or cold with it. They either love it or they hate it.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
All right, man. This was awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Is there a good way for people to reach out to you if they want to reach out for more?
I always direct people to the podcast. I always joke around saying, man, we got enough content there, 1,400 episodes over a decade to keep you busy for a really long time. If you're just one of those guys that you're just, I guess, tired of content and you want real, live upfront interaction with other like-minded men, you can check out our mastermind. If you go to thedadedge.com/mastermind, we've got 2 programs, one for guys who are W-2s and one for guys who are 100% business owners. So it's called The Boardroom.
I'm curious, why 2 different ones based on dadding? What's the difference you see there?
Yeah, so we used to have just one program. It was called Dad Edge Alliance. It was just one program, kind of one size fits all. That's been going on for almost 10 years. And then about 3 years into it, we had more and more business owners that would come in and leave. And the feedback we got was, I need more than this. And I need help with scaling a business while not losing my marriage and connection with my kids. So, and being a business owner myself and you as well, there's a lot of mental, physical, emotional output that goes into running a business. I always say when you have a job, you're paying your own mortgage. When you run a business, you're paying your mortgage and other people's mortgage. So there's a little bit more pressure on that, when you have employees, team, culture, vision, product, services, all that good stuff. And what we do is we feed that area for men. And then we also teach them the skills to cultivate their marriage and their kids too.
That's cool. Just as a again, business owner for a couple decades now, being a part of a lot of masterminds and groups and that sort of thing, I would say one of the things that's most often overlooked is what happens to relationships while you're just there grinding. I mean, there's a reason why so many business owners get divorces and multiple, because it's a grind and it never leaves, right? You can't just clock out.
So true.
So yeah, that's good stuff, man. Appreciate you having that. Appreciate you being here. This is really good stuff, Larry. Thank you for
back at you, man. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. This was so much fun, and thanks for creating the space. And I just want to share one thing. You're a good man. I can tell you were brave enough to hold a mirror to my face. In 10 years of doing this, as many times as I've told that story, you've been the only person that's picked up on that.
Wow.
And I appreciate that because it was probably something I didn't even really see until you pointed it out. And I just want to say thank you. This is a prime example, guys, of if you listen to Josh's podcast, you're listening to a man who obviously has a heart and a vision of gold and who's brave enough to stand in the fire with another man to allow him to see what's going on that maybe he didn't. So I really appreciate you being brave and doing that very much. So thank you.
That's very impactful for me. So thank you. All right, you guys. I don't know how a better way to end the podcast than that. So we'll see you next time.